last exercise for this evening that I wanted to talk about is the bridges. So there are many ways for me to make a bridge a little bit harder. I'm going to talk about as many of them as I can think of off the top of my head for today. You can use suspension straps like the TRX and the yoga swing. I'm not going to bother to demonstrate those today just because of where my camera is set up and I'm lazy. But I will show you how to do them with physio ball. There's two different ways that we can do them like that. We're going to do single leg bridge, double leg bridge, all that kind of thing. So I'm just going to go through a few of them to kind of get an idea. And I'm going to start with the basic bridge. So again, I have some Pilates training background, and the bridge is a Pilates exercise. When you talk to a Pilates instructor, they will tell you that the way you want to do a bridge is you want to isolate the movement within your spine as best you can to be able to come up in more of a segmental pattern. Again, I have a spinal fusion from T4 to L4, so I have to come up in a very straight, I come up like a brick. So that's because I don't have the physical capacity to put any bend in my spine. I do get a pelvic tilt before I come up, and that is the only segment of my spine that I do have movement. So the reason that I'm doing this one today after having finished the pelvic tilt exercises is because they do go fairly hand in hand. So a lot of the time if I'm having a patient or a personal training client or my husband do a bridge, I do want to go over the pelvic tilt a little bit because that helps you to kind of start with that isolation of movement. So the first part of your body that should be isolating the movement is going to be in your pelvis by getting that pelvic tilt. And then you're going to think about getting just the very lower part of your lumbar spine, then aiming for the upper part of your lumbar spine, and then lower thoracic, middle thoracic, until you're up to your upper thoracic. As you get better at them, you want to think about really isolating it further, so you might be able to try and think about getting just one or two joints moving at a time. And so eventually it becomes a nice wave movement. Again, I personally cannot demonstrate that. My husband doesn't have the core control to be able to demonstrate that, so even if I could convince him to come down long enough to do a video for me, I wouldn't be able to really get a good video of him doing it. He is working on it, and I'm working on it with him, but he still comes up in probably about 3 chunks rather than segments. And that's very common. Most people, we don't have a lot of control and isolation, especially in our spine, because we tend to move our back in segments. So we tend to do our entire lumbar spine and our entire thoracic spine, or lower thoracic and upper thoracic. We don't necessarily do a lot of isolation. And that is one thing that this really calls for. And it helps to have a healthier spine if you are capable of moving it in that way, to be able to isolate that movement in the way. So, like I said, I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Unfortunately, I can't demonstrate it. I will show you the little bit of segmental movement that I have, and then I will show you how we can advance the bridges from a more basic bridge. So, get into position. So, essentially for our bridge, the easiest way to do it, the starting bridge position is going to be hands down to help stabilize. Ideally, I'm going to be looking up at the ceiling, but because I would like to make sure that I'm demonstrating a good bridge, I'm going to look at the camera for a little bit. So what I'm going to do first, and again, you're going to keep your hands down, but I want to show here, I'm tilting my pelvis backwards. This is going to help lift my bottom up a little bit. Then as I'm coming into my bridge, I want to think about getting my bottom first. So in an ideal world, if I had segmental movement, I would have my pelvis come off the ground first, then my lower back, which my lower back, it's hard to see, is actually already a couple inches off, and then my lower thoracic here, and then my middle thoracic until I'm into my full bridge position, which is going to be like this, okay? So I want to be almost a straight line from my shoulder through my hip down to my knee, okay? Obviously, women have curves. We're not necessarily straight. Got a body. But my ribs are meeting up in a line with my hips at this point. Okay? So that's how I do a bridge. So I'm going to show you once with my hands down. So I'm going to start with my tilt. I'm doing the best that I can to isolate to my lower lumbar, upper lumbar, lower thoracic, middle thoracic, upper thoracic, until I'm all the way up. Then I'm going to push into as straight a position as I can get, really squeezing with my gluteal muscles back there to get a nice extension in a straight line. And then when I'm coming down, I want the same thing. I want to think about letting my upper thoracic, middle thoracic, lower thoracic, upper lumbar, lower lumbar, down to my pelvis, and then to a neutral spine. So I want that segmental movement on the way up and on the way down. To make it a little bit harder, but not too much harder, I can bring my hands up. So now I no longer have my hands to stabilize my body, so it causes just a little bit more difficulty in the fact that now I'm balancing on my feet and my shoulder blades. So again, ideally a segmental movement. I don't have that capability, so this is what happens for me. Once I'm up here, I can either hold it or I can come back down. Okay. My next step is going to be what we call a single leg bridge. I'm going to move one of my legs a little bit closer to my center line. This is going to allow me to balance better, because if I keep it out here, it's going to be very difficult to maintain. Okay, so I'm going to put it almost in line with if I dropped a line through the center of my body. Okay, so that's where my right leg is right now. My left leg is going to come up, and I'm going to hold it up in the air. And now I'm going to come up into my bridge and come back down. And I can just go up and down with this single leg, and I'll be switching legs. Same thing, okay? To make it a little bit harder from there, again, my left leg is about center line. I can bring my hands back up in front of me. So when I'm doing a single leg bridge, what I really want to pay attention to, I want to make sure that I'm not letting my pelvis drop on this side. So just because this leg isn't supporting me doesn't mean I'm not keeping that pelvis nice and straight, okay? So really want to avoid doing that. Again, if my leg is in center line, it's going to be easier for me to maintain that pelvic position than if I have my leg in the same position that I had when it was doing the double legs. So now I'm in a double leg position. I have to work all that much harder to keep my pelvis up so that I've got a nice straight line here. And come down, okay? So to do this, what I'm going to do, coming back to my lateral pelvic tilt, I'm going to engage those muscles that are going to tilt towards this leg. All I'm going to do is pull them a little bit so that I'm nice and stable and I'm pulling straight, not necessarily going into a tilt to that side, but I'm using them to make sure that they're stable there. Oh, I keep getting a hamstring cramp. So that's going to be my harder position, okay? Because, again, my leg isn't necessarily in midline. So as it's out under this leg, I have to work harder to support the side that doesn't have a leg to support it. And again, if my hands are up, this is a much harder position than if my hands are down, okay? You can bring your legs close. You're not going to get necessarily as much extension, or you can bring your legs further. You're going to get a lot more hamstring activation, okay? So toy with it a little bit. Figure out where is a good spot for you. Part of why I kept getting a hamstring cramp is that position was putting a lot of stress on this hamstring. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means that it's an uncomfortable position for me personally. So that is going to be my bridges on the floor. I can use bosu underneath my feet. I mean, technically I can do it under my chest too. It makes life a little bit harder, but not necessarily too difficult if I'm putting my feet on the squishy side. So I'm going to put my feet on the flat side real quick, just to show you. So I want my feet fairly center. I can, feel free to go wide and really try and keep that level and come up. Or I can keep my feet together. A little bit easier. Okay. Again, hands up in the air, feet wide. This is harder. Hands down by my side, feet together. Easier. Okay. This is when life gets a little bit more difficult. So with the physio ball, I can use it in two different ways. So I can use it under my chest or under my feet. I really like physio balls because they're fairly inexpensive, and you can get them just about anywhere. So you can get one for like between $10 and $15. Any sports equipment or online, and because they're fairly cheap, if they pop or they break or you lose it or you give it to your horses to play with, it's not such a horrible thing if it ends up breaking, because again, it was like $10. So eventually you stop giving them to your horses because you are done paying $10 every 2 weeks for them to play with the ball. Looking at you, anyway, so to do a bridge from the ball with my shoulders, again, life is easier if I put my hands down for stability. For this one, I figure once you get to this point, you're pretty well ready to do a full bridge. So all I'm doing is relaxing, coming down, trying to keep that ball where it is, squeezing through my glutes, coming into my straight line, and bridge. Okay? So I don't want this. I'm not pushing through my legs. All I'm doing is allowing my pelvis to come up and down. Okay? Now this is going to be one of my hardest versions of a bridge. Okay? So I want to have my feet flat on the ball. That's going to give me the best grip. I can do it here. That is going to get a lot more hamstrings. So we're going to start with feet on the ball. Again, you can put your hands down or you can bring your hands up in front of you, depending on how hard you want to make life. So I don't know if you can see the side to side. It takes a lot of effort and concentration to keep that ball stationary. So I'm pushing through my feet on the ball, lifting up, trying to keep my pelvis still, and I'm trying to come through both legs evenly so that, again, my pelvis stays level. Okay, I can bring my ball out here and do it with straight legs. Again, hands in the air makes life a little harder. Hands by my side makes life a little easier. Okay. I can do my bridges here. This does get a lot of hamstring pull, so you are going to feel it right back here more than necessarily in your glutes. So the gluteus maximus is one of our core muscles. So this is a good muscle to activate. This is an okay muscle, but if you really want to engage your core, you need more glute than hamstring. Okay. Again, I can make this a lot harder if I want to by throwing in a hamstring curl. So we're bridge, hamstrings, bridge, and down. If I really feel spicy. Single leg. Okay. Yeah, I think that's about it for bridges. So you can always do a single leg to make life a lot harder. Hands up makes life harder. Hands down gives you a little bit extra stability. The physio ball really makes your life a lot harder. You will, depending on how well you're stabilizing, run the risk of getting a lot more hamstrings. So you may end up getting some hamstrings with the rest of your core. So again, you know, advance once you've got the other position mastered. So if I can do a bridge down here and really keep my pelvis level and make sure that I'm not tilting and staying up nice and straight is in this position, then I can try and advance to the next one. So again, with the physio ball, both legs, hands down, then I can make it a little bit harder. So don't feel like you need to hurry up to the next step. And it might be that when you first get into that position, when you first use the next hardest device, you might only be able to do one or two with good control, and then you end up losing that control. And once you lose control, we're no longer really engaging the correct muscles. There's no point to doing it. You're better off doing one or two very, very well and stopping than you are doing one or two well and then 8 really terribly. So if you find yourself starting to slip in your form, then you need to go back to the slightly easier version. So for me, when I do my pikes in the morning, I can do about 5 or 6, depending on how strong I am in any given day, of the pikes with my hands straight or my arms straight, using either the physio ball or the yoga swing. My arms start getting tired, I lose form, my back gets tired, my abdomen gets tired, I lose all of the form, I'm not coming up as high. Then I come down onto my forearms and I do another 5 on my forearms, or 4 if I was feeling a little stronger that day. So again, there's no reason why you can't mix up the slightly harder and the slightly easier versions as long as you're doing them well. And that's how you improve the strength that you need to be able to go on to the next step. So if you are pushing yourself too quickly, you're going to end up losing the technique and the position that you need. It's not going to benefit you as much than it will if you're really taking the time to make sure you're doing them controlled and good form. So hope it helped. Enjoy some bridges, and I'll figure out what to do next. Any suggestions are more than welcome.